Picture, if you will, Christmas morning, 1956, in some New England state. Maybe it's New Hampshire, Connecticut, Vermont, I don't know. Somewhere where Christmas was invented in the 1940s. Little Jimmy comes running down the stairs, hoping to see maybe a longer, skinnier present under the tree with his name on it, because his parents have been maybe dropping some hints that he might get an honest-to-goodness proper air rifle this year. And that would be replacing the old BB gun that he's been wearing out. Some of his friends have recently got proper honest-to-goodness air rifles that shoot 22 caliber pellets and pump up to produce significant power over the old BB guns. And Jimmy's hoping for one of those. What might his parents have got him? He sees the package. What's inside? Welcome back to Canic Air. What we have here is potentially Jimmy's 1956 Christmas present. I say Jimmy because all kids were named Jimmy back then, including the girls. This is a Crosman 140. And Jimmy had possibilities under the tree. His parents might have got him a Benjamin 132. Some of his friends had those, and he rather liked them, and they shot them well. He didn't think his dad was going to splurge and get him a Sheridan. Those nice 20 caliber guns that were considered the royalty of American air gunning back then. His dad didn't drive a Cadillac; he drove a Plymouth, and he didn't think that that a Sheridan was going to quite be a possibility. Not that Jimmy really wanted one anyway. Sheridan shot those oddball 20 caliber pellets that the corner store did not have. You had to make a special trip to the hardware store to get those, and even then they didn't have many in the corner of the cabinet. So the other possibility was a Crosman. And sure enough, when Jimmy unwrapped his present, there it was, the latest version of the Crosman 140. 22 caliber, just like he wanted. A pump-up pneumatic gun, just like every honest-to-goodness American air rifle boasted in those days. Variable power, you could pump up a little bit for close-range shooting and pump it up more for distant shots. Who wouldn't want that? Jimmy probably had a cousin who had an older Model 120, and the story goes of those was that you could pump them up. You were supposed to pump them up, I think, a maximum of 8 times, maybe 10, and that was that. If you went too far with it, trying to boost the power in the gun on some magical way, well, you could put so much pressure on the valve that the striker hammer would just bounce right off it, meaning the gun wouldn't fire. And that was a significant issue, because now you've got a loaded gun that's all pumped up and could go bang at some point. You don't exactly know when. You had 2 options. One was to wait days, weeks, until the pressure dropped when the gun actually would fire. Or you get your dad to take it apart and tap the hammer with some sort of dowel or something like that to release the pressure and fire the pellet out that you no doubt had loaded in there. Crosman was aware that this was an issue, and so they came up with the Crosman 140 in 1950. When did they come out? 1955, maybe 54? Yeah, so this had a different valve system. Instead of a hammer to strike the valve and release the gas, or the air in this case, pumped up air, they had a blow-off valve. Pulling the trigger actually lets the valve blow open. I got to take that apart and find out how that kind of works. I'm really kind of curious. But, so yeah, this was kind of stated at that time. This is the second version of this gun. Jimmy had the latest version of it. The first version, you had to push a button on the back here to set the trigger before you could pump the gun up. This one did it automatically. It just started pumping and it would just click into place and off it would go. Still has what they call the spoon type bolt handle on here. This one's a little bit stiff and rough. It's an old gun now. And it has an aluminum receiver. The third version of this gun, so this is the second version, the third version came out, they switched to a steel receiver, and they got rid of the plate. I could just grab this thing and slid it back and forth. And then there was a fourth version that lasted until 1968, and they beefed up the trigger the trigger guard on it had a casting on it, and the safety, I believe, was moved from a crossbolt safety right through the stock to the trigger guard. They also changed some of the cosmetics a bit. The sight became an actual casting. I don't know if they used. I think they might have used plastic actually at that point. Yeah, I guess they would have. This one is actually metal, just folded over. I love that kind of cute little detail right there. Just take the piece of metal and bend it over, and there's your front sight. Gotta love the 1950s for things like that. Ingenious and works fine. Looks odd, but there you go. This gun's also a takedown. You can undo this screw and pop the mechanism out of the stock, which will shorten the gun down by a good bit. Might make it easier for travel, pack it somewhere. Who knows? But they definitely put it on there for that possibility. And this gun is, well, again, made sometime between 1955 and 57. So I picked Christmas 1956. So it's a pretty old gun now. It's not quite 70 years old, but it's getting there. And after all those years, well, time has taken its toll. This doesn't hold up anymore. All tension's gone on there. These parts are kind of rough. They need a bit of polishing. And when you do pump it up a bit, you can get pressure in there, and I have managed to fire a pellet out of it. But if you let it sit for a while, the air just leaks out and it won't fire. So it needs a bit of TLC. Fortunately, you can still get pretty much all the parts you need. So this is a fairly modern replacement parts kit. This one I got from Henry Ford. That's Crosman600repair.com, and yeah, looks like that should do the job. There's a little replacement felt gasket for the pump handle, the pump cup, which I'm pretty sure is shot on this one, and of course we've got our replacement O-rings and the valve seat, which I'm pretty sure is also probably what's leaking all the air out even when you do get it in there. So this is going to be a fun little project to work on. The woodwork on it, there's some marks and scratches on it here and there. It is fairly attractive. I do rather like it. But yeah, it's the finish has kind of got a lot of crap in it, so I'm going to have to probably sand it down a bit and refinish it a little bit somehow, just to give it a bit of a fresher look. They're not a terribly scarce or rare gun, I suppose. So although coming up on 70 years old, there's got to be a lot that have been scrapped by then. You can see some little bits of rust here, and this is, of course, the most common place you're going to find it when somebody is trying to pump it up with sweaty hands. You leave a bit of human oil behind, and it will cause a bit of corrosion there. So I'm gonna have to deal with that a little bit. But this is gonna be a fun project to work on, and be fun to see how it stands up all these years. So anyway, follow me along. We'll see if we can rescue Jimmy's prized possession from 1956. First thing I figured needed to be done was to remove the pump arm. They make special punches just for roll pins, but I don't happen to have any of those, so fortunately this one came out without too much trouble. Some of these parts have been together for quite some time, so pretty sticky. The pump cup is pretty dry and brittle, so glad I bought replacements. In dismantling the receiver, you can't help but be reminded of how really similar this is to current Crosman offerings, like say the 2240 pistol, for instance, still uses the receiver of this almost identical design, even though it's a CO2 pistol. Barrel's pretty clean, but I put a cleaning patch through it anyway. But and of course clean the interior of all these tubes. And the valve itself has to come out the front because there's a crimp in the tube that stops it from moving any further back. No, I'm not going to crank on this with the pliers. I'm just measuring the gap. I can pad it. Just on a dowel, just poke the valve out the front. It actually came out a lot easier than I thought it would. I was going to have to get the valve body apart to replace the seal and the various pieces inside there, but it was pretty tightly stuck together. At this point, it's still a mystery as to how this thing works. I'll have to figure it out later. Wrap some tape around the valve, clamped it in my handy vise. Use the and it came free pretty easily once you clamp it properly and get a good bit of leverage on it. Pretty manky inside there, but we'll get it clean. Well, I think I figured out to my satisfaction how this valve mechanism works, and it's quite a bit different from Crosmans we've seen in more recent years. It is a blow-off valve as opposed to a striker type valve. What looks like a hammer here really isn't. We see that in, and again, this receiver looks really familiar. Anybody who's taken apart a 1322 or 2240, this is clearly of the same type of design, but what happens underneath it is completely different. The valve here isn't struck open, this little pin right here, is not the thing that knocks the valve open and lets the gas out. Instead, the inside here we have this little piece here. It's got an O-ring on the outside, and it has a seal inside it, which is going to be a real bear to replace because obviously it's been crimped in with this steel piece right here, and that's not coming out. So we're going to have to pry the seal out and worm the new one back in. But how that works is the gun builds up pressure inside this little hole goes in there. You have now a little cavity full of highly compressed air that wants to get out, and it wants to push this thing open like that. And it can't because holding it back is the trigger right here. This is holding back this little metal weight, and when you pull the trigger, the pressure pushes that forward like that towards the back of the gun, allowing this to come forward just a little bit and bleed air out this hole right here. This is your transfer port, goes up underneath the receiver right there. So the air escapes out that way as it is let go, as opposed to being forced open. So, and once it pops open, of course, the pressure immediately drops, and it is compressed this spring back, and then the spring pushes forward again, and through this little pin right here, resets the valve, pushes it right back to where it came from. So it gets reset, blocked off again, ready to pump up again, and this little weight is sitting forward, and as soon as you let go of the trigger, it locks it again. So it's a blow open valve. If it's such a wonderful idea, why doesn't Crosman still do this? And the fact of the matter is the one flaw in it apparently is that the more you pump it up, the more pressure there is on this weight here, and the heavier the trigger pull gets. So if you pump it up to full power, you have a fairly hard trigger, and if you pump it up, a few pumps, it's a lot more light. So it's a little inconsistent on the trigger pull. And of course, if you wanted to really pump it up, well beyond its rated pressure levels, then you need the fingers of an orangutan to pull this open. But yeah, that's how it works. It's very interesting, very different. We've got a few seals to replace. As I said, that one inside, there are two of them inside here. Those got to be replaced. And then there is one seal in here. I think I've done this up a little too tight. That one gets replaced. Then we're replacing this spring, and we're replacing, stuck in there, is the valve seal, the one-way check valve that allows this is your cavity here where the compressed air is stored. I'm going to clean everything here. Everything's a bit grubby and corroded from years of use, so I'm going to try and clean everything out, polish it up without losing any of the tight tolerances we have. So this piece right here is the part that goes down through the stock, and that's what holds the stock on. So yeah, we'll give everything a good clean before we start putting new seals on it. So I was able to remove the old pump cup and the lubricating felt pad. These are all arranged on here like so. This piece goes on there like that. This is a full cup. Of course, there's bits of it just kind of crumbled away. The rubber was pretty brittle with age. And this is the end piece that goes on there. This is all pretty difficult to get apart. You can check with Nibs over at Walnut and Steel. He's got a very good video on how to pull this apart, so I won't go there. It did involve me having to take it to my other workshop where I had a crescent wrench just thin enough to slide in between these two pieces here. Once you get the felt out of the way, it's why it looks kind of mangled. Got to slide in there and then drive this down to get it free from the brass piece, and that just kind of traps it in there. So Trying to figure out chicken and egg problem here, what seals to do first. There's our new pump cup, and there is our new felt washer, which I will put some silicone oil on it to get it started. This thing needs to be sort of soaked in oil so that it keeps lubricating the pumping tube continuously forever. So you add oil to it as you go, but this will go on here like so. Then comes our washer, and I see it's beveled on one side. I wonder which way that is. And then that'll go on like that. Pump cup will go on there, brand new one. Put a little bit of silicone oil on the inside of it because we'll never see that again. And then this brass ferrule will go over top, and I will have to pound that down, make it nice and flush with the end of this aluminum piece here, and then we'll put that back onto the pumping arm and put it all back in the gun when I need to. Of course, the valve's got to go in first. So I've cleaned all the parts and removed all the residue of the old seals, and I've got the seal kit cracked open and putting the new seals in their appropriate places. Polished the insides of the parts as best I could. This is probably the trickiest seal to get in. You've got to squeeze it down, mash it in there, but there's a little groove that has to expand. It has to expand into, and that's not the easiest thing to do. As I said before, I'm pretty sure at the factory they put the seal in and they crimp on a little steel ring over top of it. But eventually, it goes in. Wasn't as bad as I thought. It makes a nice little seal with the end of that part of the valve there. Coat everything with some silicone oil. Help preserve all the various pieces as they go about their duty. New spring goes in there. The old one spring seemed fine, but put the new one anyway. I figured out later that when I put the valve body together, that little tiny gap where you could see this O-ring here really wasn't meant to be visible. I had to crank it down a lot tighter just to get the valve to properly sit in the gun, make all the holes line up properly. So couldn't do it by hand here. I ended up having to put it in the vise later on. So of my replacement parts kit, I still have two pieces left over. This little black washer here, the O-ring here, I'm pretty certain isn't needed because that I've already used the other one in this gun. This is the this is stuck in there. This is the pellet probe with the transfer port to push the pellet down the barrel. That's the O-ring I installed. This one here is smaller, and I'm gathering that would be for the Model 147, the 177 version of this gun. This is the 22, so a little larger washer there, or O-ring there. So I don't need that. But this other one here, only thing left is the transfer port from the pressure tube here up through into our receiver. So that bolts in there like that. the barrel nests in here. That screw goes down there, so that right there, the transfer port has to come up from the valve through this gasket to keep everything tight and into the receiver. It's a fairly thick piece there. Hopefully that's correct. I might have to shave it down a bit because it seems much thicker than the one that I took out. So I can always get a razor out and just thin it down a little bit if it's just mashed down a little bit too much. So we'll worry about that in a few minutes. In the meantime, I'm going to get all the valving put in here to get this thing ready to be pumped up and see if it works again. So my plan is to put the stock parts back together again before I put the rest of the valves and whatever back in. This is the safety. It runs this little collar right here, which goes in on this side. And the fun part of it is there's a spring that runs through it, and 2 ball bearings, which provide the necessary click stops. So I'm going to put that in there. Let's see if I can find a little container of gun oil. There we go. Just use this regular, ordinary gun oil to keep things running smoothly in there. The safety was not working properly when I took it apart the first time. It wasn't clicking over and engaging, so want to make sure that works properly. So 1 ball bearing goes in there, and the collar, which I've just lost. There it is. It goes there, and then the other ball bearing, which is rolling around inside. There it is. There. Goes there like so, and then we squish it all together, and there it goes. So we have our click stops there. Only a bit of the red paint's left. I should probably retouch that a little bit when I get a chance later on. So this is the last piece I got out, so presumably it's the first piece to go back in. I'm not quite sure how to, well, I guess that can just tap in there, can't it? No, don't, oh, I just lost my ball bearings and everything, haven't I? Okay, try that again. Okay, as application of the right hammer, just knock those pieces in nicely, so there we go. Okay, now this has to go in. Trigger spring's got to go in first, though, I think. This goes in. Trigger return spring. This goes in here. And now my plan is to add just a little bit of a washer, because this trigger wobbles fairly loosely. It's just pinned right through the wood stock. There's nothing fancy going on there. So let's see if I could get that to align with the washer in place. Maybe. Okay, that's through there. I was thinking of a plastic washer, but there's really still not enough gap for that, so thin metal washer will just have to do. It's too bad I've got an assortment of all sorts of lovely sizes of nylon washers, but not going to go through here. Okay, that's through. There's our trigger. Okay. Okay. Some of these parts might get cleaned up cosmetically later on. Some of the rough edges on the screws and things like that could be dealt with, but for the moment, I still don't know if this gun's going to work. So first things first, to get it back together again and see if it functions. Yes, I know I've put a lot of work into cleaning up the stock and everything, which is again might come to nothing if the gun is completely useless. So, oops. Okay, there's our trigger. So with all the seals in place and the valve nicely tightened down, as you can see, you can't see that little gap there anymore. Slide everything back into the gun, being very careful not to nick or scratch any of these O-rings we just carefully put in. Might not look that I'm being careful in this speeded up version, but believe me, I am very mindful of those little precious little O-rings. Make sure that the transfer port's lined up properly. This little piece has to go in that way. Slightly asymmetrical. Trying to figure out the right tweezers so I can just get this in that little hole. It turned out to be a lot easier than I thought. And this little weighted piece, which you can't really call a hammer, that has to go in with the convex side facing the back of the gun, which is not quite what you'd think, but that bears on the sear, so that's why I guess they shaped it like that. Putting the pump arm back into the gun. Again, being very careful not to damage or nick this brand new pump cup. I'm tapping on the back of the arm and just using sort of momentum to snake this thing along. It's not actually butting up against anything on the bench. I'm just tapping it and the arm is just gliding in. And this transfer port seal is way too thick for the purpose here. There's no way I'd be able to tighten that screw down without mashing this little rubber piece and making it, well, squishing it so that it wouldn't properly let air through it. So I decided to remove about 1/3 off of it thickness-wise.
And it seemed about right. Barrel is held in with this little one little grub screw there. It's remarkable, just one little screw holds that thing in, but that's it. Then goes the pellet probe, making sure that the transfer port side of it faces down when the cover is closed. You got a 50-50 chance of getting it right if you're not paying attention. I have to say, this cover doesn't slide very well on the aluminum. Just a bit of galling, I guess. It's nothing terribly wrong with it. It just sort of a bit of stiction there. I find it easier just to grasp the whole cover and turn it in my fingers rather than use the little spoon-shaped bolt handle. And maybe that's why Crosman deleted the handle in the next version of this gun. That little screw is hard to get to. The pellet probe kind of covers half of it, or about a third of it. Okay, so with the gun all together, it's time to put it across the chronograph and see what we're going to get out of it. First off, 405 feet per second with only 3 pumps, but I think I had some air pressure left in the gun from when I put it away, so next shots, yeah, down a bit here. But it's only 3 pumps. So averaging 364.4, although maybe swayed by that first shot over 400. So let's try it with 4 pumps. .353, barely more. .394, more promising. 385. 372. 359. Okay, 372.6. Let's try it with 5 pumps then. 426. 402. Oh dear. 397. This is with daisy pellets, which I've never had too much success with. Haven't found any guns that shoot them terribly well, so maybe different pellets might actually be a little better. Okay, so 5 pumps give us 405 feet per second. Well, I'm going straight to 8. 460. So we're not cracking 500 feet per second, are we? An old chart in the L. Wesley's book on air guns says the Crosman 140 back in its day with 8 pumps could do 600 feet per second. It didn't say with what pellets, though. And of course, that was a gun that was pretty much factory new at that point. I get mid 450s here. So 451.8. Okay. Okay, I've rechecked all the various pieces in the valve and everything. Everything is in the right place.
Nothing's no parts are flipped backwards or anything crazy like that. Everything looks perfectly good. I'm gonna try a couple of different pellets here. These are the Diana branded JSB exact jumbo Diablos. These weigh 15.89 grains, so they're a little on the heavier side, but let's see if we can get this pumped up. I'm gonna go straight to 8 pumps maximum. Let's see what we can get out of it. Okay. And safety off. $4.96. $4.82. Not as much that time. $4.85. That's fairly consistent there. I'm going to try the lighter Meister Kugel 14 grain pellet wad cutter. Awfully difficult to do that over the bench, trying to keep everything under the camera. If you had to do that every time, these rifles wouldn't have sold so well. Safety catch. 506. So, yeah, okay. Well, we should take this to the range and see how it shoots for accuracy, because that, after all, is all that really matters.
So here we are at the range. I decided to use the JSB Jumbo RS pellets, which are a little bit lighter than the ones I was checking with before. Only going with 5 pumps. And discovered with my very first group that the rifle was shooting almost to point of aim. Despite having been apart and back together again at 20 yards, it just shooting slightly to the left and perhaps slightly high. So it shouldn't be too hard to fix. Little Jimmy would bend the rear sight over ever so slightly, would bring it right onto target, and you can adjust it for height with too much trouble. That shot there went a bit high. Don't know if that was my fault or maybe inconsistent pumping. Actually, I'm going to blame myself on that one. So if you ignore that top one there, we've got a pretty much a 1-inch group. Otherwise, it's about 46 millimeters. So, but yeah, this is a very enjoyable gun. I rather like it. I think it's a nice, neat, trim little package. I can see why Crosman did really well with them back in the day. It had the advantage of being a bit less expensive. W.H.B. Smith's book says this gun sold for $16.95, when a Benjamin of similar spec went for $20, and a Sheridan went for $23.95. So that doesn't sound like a big difference, but back in those days when every dollar counted, that would be that'd be fairly significant. Sort of like today between comparing a $170 gun to a $240 gun, I suppose. But as I said, I rather like this gun. I look forward to experimenting with it a little bit more in the future. See if I can find any way to bring its velocity back up to what it supposedly had back in the day. Although I've done a bit of research, and perhaps this is par for the course. Not every last one of these guns was quite as potent as they were made out to be. But anyway, have enjoyed it, and I look forward to having some more fun with this in the future. But in the meantime, thanks for watching. Canuck Air will return. Consider subscribing.